fellow Nigerians, with love for our country and a fierce commitment to a vision of rapid progress for our more than 180 million citizens, and following wide-ranging consultations, I offer myself to serve you as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as from May 29, 2019. I therefore intend to be a candidate in the 2019 presidential election. I seek the opportunity to offer our country visionary, purposeful, competent leadership to build our future. Nearly 60 years ago, our founding fathers, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sir Ahmadu Bello, and Chief Obafemi Awolowo, envisioned a great country that would take its pride of place in the world based on the talents of its citizens and a constitutional federation that would ensure justice, equity, and economic productivity. Their visions and hopes have yet to materialize. Military rule, oil booms and busts, and the successive leadership failures of our civilian political class have combined to rob us of what seemed our destiny at independence in 1960. I am standing here today saying, it is time we shatter the downward spiral to nowhere. I am here today standing with the 110 missing girls of Dabchi and their grieving family, and with the traumatized young women of Chibok, those with us and those who are still in captivity. I am standing here with 100 million Nigerians, in addition to the thousands of businesses struggling to share a measly 4,000 megawatts of electricity. I am here today standing with the 100 million Nigerians experiencing crushing poverty, living on less than 300 naira a day. I am here today because 33 million of our able-bodied men and women are unemployed or underemployed. Nearly 15 million children are out of school, and only 60% of Nigerians are literate. I am here today because our hospitals are understaffed and mismanaged death traps. Our women are still subject to horrific prejudices and devastating early marriages. I am taking this stand here and now because Nigeria today is divided by ethnic and religious conflicts made worse by corruption. The government of the day has failed in its very first duty of securing our lives as citizens, and we have lost our place in the world. The time has come for us to fix this mess. We are collectively exhausted by these politicians who continually fall in and out of alliances with each other and care nothing about the ordinary Nigerian. They aggravate our fears in the hope that we will continue to keep them in power, even though they have nothing new to offer us. It is time for a radical change in the political leadership of Nigeria. It is time for a visionary, competent, and inclusive leadership that truly cares about our country. It is time for a leadership equipped with the skills, the intellect, the competence to wage a decisive war against poverty and unemployment. It is time for a Nigeria in which our youth can fulfill their full potential and our daughters can aspire to any opportunity they desire. It is time for a 21st century leader to lead us into a new and different future. What we need now is a real movement of the people, by the people, and most importantly, for the people of Nigeria, to move our country forward and break with our troubled past. I offer myself as a part of that movement. We are a nation of great people. We see this by the way Nigerians abroad are thriving. We hear the stories of those of them who left home with little more than a hope and a prayer and have changed the world abroad. Nigerians have smarts, ingenuity, drive, relentlessness, vision, and sheer force of will. We must be able to harness our strengths and make them work for us here at home. My fellow Nigerians, to quote the immortal words of the late US President John F. Kennedy, politics is too important to be left to the politicians. We must ask our government hard questions about the promises they made about our security, about power, about civil aviation, about health care, about women's rights. The world is changing. Time and tide in several countries swept away old orders and brought in new, more dynamic ones. Nigeria must not remain stuck in its past. We, you and I, can do it for our country too. We need to modernize, and quickly. For instance, we know that women in leadership and in government can accelerate growth for any economy. Yet, only 6% of our legislators in Nigeria are women. 6%. There are many, many competent, smart women who are more than ready to dig in and work together to rescue this country. We must draw them out and ensure that their voices are heard. We must stop recycling failed politicians and regenerate our leadership ranks with competent and experienced young men and women. Youth who have prepared themselves with the relevant qualifications must take over the mantle of leadership, because this struggle is about the future of Nigeria, not its past. The battle to reorient Nigeria into a strong, capable country requires competence, capacity, and character. And as a citizen who aspires to be president, I believe, in all humility, that I possess all three. If it is about competence, my work as a deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, who played a leadership role in rescuing and stabilizing the Nigerian banking system after the global financial crisis, speaks for itself. If it is about capacity, my work in the United Nations, reconstructing countries torn by civil war, or reforming the internal workings of the world body, is there for everyone to see. If it is about character, well, talk to my colleagues, my mentors, my friends, and of course, my family, and listen to what they have to say. Strong, knowledgeable guidance is needed as Nigeria navigates these difficult waters. And I offer myself for service with a solid track record of leadership. I am not here to tell you that there are easy and quick solutions to all Nigeria's problems. Far from it. Decades of economic and leadership mismanagement cannot be undone in a few short weeks or months. Things will be difficult, and painful choices will have to be made, collectively made. What I am here to tell you is this: together we can choose a new path. Together we can set a bold agenda. Together we can deliver for ourselves a different outcome. Nigeria will achieve greatness. I have not announced today the political party platform on which I intend to contest for the presidency. My focus for now is the people of Nigeria, and not on party platforms that have in the past been mere vehicles for capturing political power. While I have been approached by a number of political parties, the movement that I am part of will decide which one we will join. That decision will be based on commonality of vision and the imperative of a generational shift in leadership. And we will be announcing that decision in the coming weeks. Based on such a decision, we shall seek to build a formidable coalition of parties for the presidential election that together will represent a clear and credible alternative to the failed political leadership class that has enthroned corruption and incompetence in the governance of Nigeria. It is important that we begin to focus more closely on the individuals seeking elective office in our country and their qualifications in terms of character, competence, capacity, and track record. We have traditionally focused too much on platforms and structures that, although they are and remain a necessary part of our democratic process, in our national experience, they have mainly delivered the wrong candidates. Naturally, these candidates have gone on to be failed leaders. It is good candidates that will create credible political parties. Visionless parties cannot produce the best candidates. Therefore, I say, let us begin this conversation where it really matters. Who are you? What are your credentials? What are your qualifications? What's your character? And so on. Those are the things that should matter first. Let me discuss my policy agenda. My vision for this country, our country, is set in my new book, Build, Innovate, and Grow, which we released and launched 2 days ago. Build, Innovate, and Grow. Short title, BIG. In summary, however, the agenda of a government under my leadership includes the following. Section 1, leadership and governance. Number 1, we will compose a world-class First 11 team based on merit and inclusive governance to drive government policy in Nigeria. We will be ready on day 1. The appointment of all senior officials of the presidency will be announced within 48 hours. My government will enthrone evidence-based public policy, strategy, and risk management as tools of effective and modern governance. Number 2, we will establish and propagate through the educational system of Nigeria a foundational philosophical worldview for the Nigerian state, around which all Nigerians will unite in a common purpose. Section 2, nation building. We will lead a consultative political process in cooperation with the National Assembly and the state houses of assembly to achieve a constitutional restructuring of Nigeria and return our country to true federalism for stability and prosperity by 2021. That is 2 years from taking office. We will deliver lock, stock, and barrel a restructured federation. We will implement a 50-50 gender parity policy in all political appointments. There will be equal numbers of men and women in political appointments under the government that I will head. That is nearly double. That is nearly double the ratio recommended by the National Gender Policy of 2008, and that ratio was 30%. The government that I will lead will establish and implement a diaspora engagement and return policy and strategy as a new fundamental component of our national quest for development, as has been the case in China, in India, and in Israel. My government will build the Diaspora Commission, approved by the National Assembly, into an effective world-class institution to accomplish this important agenda. Our government will undertake a fundamental overhaul of the Nigerian police force that will emphasize training, equipment, and boosting the strength of the force by recruiting at least 1.5 million men and women, up from the grossly inadequate present force strength of 350,000 people. We will secure the lives and the property of Nigerians, I promise you. Section 3, the economy. We will establish an innovation-led economy with intellectual property and commercialization of local innovation as its bedrock. 2, we will establish a venture capital fund with a minimum of 500 billion naira as a public-private partnership to invest in the creation of new businesses by presently unemployed youth in Nigeria. The new businesses created with support from the Venture Capital Fund will in turn create new jobs. The fund will be managed by the private sector. The private sector partners will manage it, while the federal government of Nigeria will be a core investor. Otherwise, if it is done anywhere else, politics of federal character and mediocrity and all sorts of things will come in. And the people who will get the venture capital finance will not be the people with the best ideas. They will be the relatives and the cronies of those who are in power. And that's wrong. We will reform energy policy to create an enabling environment for Nigerian households to be powered by renewable energy such as solar energy, wind energy, and so on, while industrial zones will be served by gas and hydro-powered energy. We will undertake a fundamental reform of Nigeria's healthcare system to assure quality healthcare for Nigerian citizens and remove the need for medical tourism abroad. Healthcare will have 15% of Nigeria's budget, in line with the Abuja Declaration of the African Union in 2001. A world-class hospital will be established in each of the 6 geopolitical zones at a federal university teaching hospital. We will undertake a fundamental reform of Nigeria's education system to create skills and human capital that will drive Nigeria's industrialization and job creation. Education will be allocated 20% of the federal government budget, with a progressive increase to 30% over 8 years. Let me conclude. I am here today because I want what is best for my country. We have no godfathers. We are just ordinary Nigerians who want a future that is very different from the sad reality of broken promises and unfulfilled national potential that has been the lot of the Nigerian people for far too long. But we know that with your support, we can bring about real progress in our country. To accomplish this, however, every citizen aged 18 and above must obtain his or her permanent voter's card and vote in the 2019 elections. Fellow Nigerians, this movement of the people, the real coalition of everyone and not a select few, belongs to you. Because it truly belongs to you, it will be accountable to you, the people. For this reason, we need to crowdsource our intellect and resources to move this country forward. To support the movement, I invite you to go to www.tobuildanation.com. www.tobuildanation.com. We must refuse to allow the political elite to continue to intimidate us with the idea that no one can replace them. They boast that they will outspend us and more. But we say to them, Nigerians will not be taken for a ride yet again. The time to sit on the fence is past, ladies and gentlemen. They made this mess. They made this mess at the ages of 30, at the ages of 35, at the ages of 40. Why do you think that at 70 years they can build our future? I'd like to end my speech by thanking my family, my lovely and ever supportive wife, who always challenges me to be the best man I can be. Thank you, dearest. To my sons and my daughter, I ask you to continue to be the amazing people you are. I am so proud of all of you. Now, 2 days ago when we were launching Build, Innovate, and Grow, my young daughter, who's just 15, launched big with 10,000 naira. Many people were challenged because of her own contribution. Many people came forward to support. If her contribution doesn't challenge you, nothing else will. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Nigerians, we can do this together. Let's get to work. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Dakola Oshibikon, Otuba Dakola Oshibikon. I'm the MD of Sahel Standard, and I represent Pilot, and I took Dari just now. So, sir, what specific areas, because I know the youth are the future of this nation, of business development you want to focus on when we vote you? Because you have already taken me off my feet, I will be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me answer your question. The very first focus of the venture capital fund will be innovation. Remember that I said that my vision of Nigeria's economy, fundamentally, at its core, is an economy that is driven by innovation, because it is innovation that creates the wealth of nations. If you look at the history of the Western world, if you look at the history of Asia and their rise to global power status, you will see that they were driven by one thing: innovation combined with human capital. In this country, you have leaders who spend every morning worshiping the God of small things, looking at the oil price. If it is down today, they are sad. If it is up tomorrow, they are happy. In the government that I will head, it's a very different vision. It's a vision in which many, many young inventors in this country and innovators in this country who invent things, and we see them published in the newspapers and the television, but we never see those products in the marketplace. Why? Because there is a break in the pipeline between invention or innovation and commercialization. This venture capital fund will plug that hole. So it will finance the commercialization of the products of innovation. Another thing that we will do with this venture capital fund, I said it will be run by the private sector. It's not going to be run by the government.
My name is Chika Chikere. I write for the Authority newspaper. So I want to take you up on your area of expertise coming from the Central Bank of Nigeria. The country's monetary policy rate has remained the same in a couple of years right now. And it's frustrating people who want to do business through the banking sector. What are you going to do to address this issue? And secondly, the foreign exchange rate. You will agree with me that it's not palatable right now. What's your take on it? Thank you.
Good. Now, on the question of the monetary policy rate, I want you to understand that there are a lot of factors that go into determining the monetary policy rate. First of all, in this country, we have a fundamental problem: lack of infrastructure. The absence of infrastructure makes the cost of everything, including the cost of money, expensive. People who manufacture products, 30 to 40% of the price goes to their generator expenses. They're trying to recover it. So that's number one. Number two, where there is inflationary pressure, if your government, as has been the case in the past, this government and in the past one, have been spending a lot of money, 80 to 90% of your federal budgets are spent on recurrent expenditure, just paying people's salaries and buying cars and awarding contracts. That is inflationary government spending. And that, inflation is the worst enemy of the poor. When that happens, the duty of any central bank is to rein in inflation. One of the ways to rein in inflation is to tighten the money supply. One of the ways to tighten the money supply is to increase the monetary policy rate. Now, that should not become a permanent feature of an economy, but at certain phases, it becomes necessary. I'm trying to explain to you what's behind the monetary policy rate. But I know that in our time in the central bank, under the governorship of Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, we successfully fought inflation and brought it down into the single digits from double digits. Having done that, unfortunately, it went up again, but I know that the central bank is also trying to bring it back down. And we know that the inflation rate has been dropping, but very gradually. So that's number one. Number two, you talked about, the second point was Forex. Yes, absolutely, Forex. We could talk about Forex until pregnancies are delivered. But the problem with this country in terms of the economic management of Nigeria, and I say it in my vision very clearly. Go and read that book, Build, Innovate, and Grow. Nigeria lacks an economic philosophy. You can't manage an economy without knowing what you believe. If you say that you're a capitalist, you've got to understand what capitalism means. It's a philosophy. It's not just something you wake up and do. There are three requirements to a successful capitalist economy. Number one is property rights. Number two is innovation. Number three is capital. We are practicing capitalism without capital. Now, one of the implications of this is that we run an oil economy. What is it that determines the rate of the naira? The exchange rate of the naira. Mostly the price of oil, how much you're selling oil for, and how much you're getting into your foreign reserves. Where the price of oil goes down, there's a lack of confidence. The government will not be able to finance imports over many months, and the value of your currency goes down. But when we have a productive economy, such as the type that we will create the environment for, in a government led by me, you will not have this problem of Forex. Because when you produce, manufacture with value addition, and then you export, you're also earning foreign currency. And that helps the exchange rate. Now, we focus too much in this country on an artificial exchange rate. We want the naira to be 1 naira to $1. Why? Because that will enable you to import. That will enable you to pay school fees for your children abroad. But you are not producing. We need to focus this economy on production and stop focusing too much on the value of the naira. When the economy becomes productive, the value of the naira will take care of itself. It's just the law of economics.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Juliana Taiwo Baloyin. I write for the Sun newspaper. Sir, giving your presentation is fantastic. All of us are moved. We want to, they call for election. I'm sure many people want to vote for you right away. But the question is, how prepared are you financially for campaigns? And then consultation. How prepared are you, to carry people along? You know the issues. How prepared are you to take these issues to them, to convince them to buy in? That's the question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And I'll answer it very quickly. In the process of coming to making this announcement, I consulted very widely across Nigeria. I consulted with young people, I consulted with older people, I consulted with children, I consulted with elder statesmen, former presidents, I consulted with traditional rulers. So in terms of consultation, we've done very wide consultations, and those consultations will continue over the next several months. Now, in terms of preparation financially, there's a big difference. I say very clearly that we have no godfathers. That's the difference about my vision. Because my vision is a vision that is rooted and focused on the ordinary common man or woman of Nigeria. It is not a vision that is driven by godfathers who are expecting returns on their investment when you come to power. Therefore, and as I said in my speech, it is necessary for all of us in Nigeria, if we want a better future for our children, if we want a better future for this country, to invest in that outcome. And that's why I'm calling on all Nigerians, whoever they may be, wherever they may be, to support this movement and to support this vision. If you respond to that call, we will not lack resources for the campaign logistics and things like that.
Thanks a lot for the bold move that you have made.
Sir, could you speak up, please?
Thank you for the bold move that you have made on this announcement. Congratulations on behalf of the 100 million Nigerians you talked about. I read somewhere that you talked about the competency and managing the right place with the right people. I read somewhere, I'm sure you've seen it, that the competency is worse than corruption. Secondly, during the 2009-2010 you were talking about, in a place like the United States, for example, instead of George Bush, he infused a lot of money in it. Barack Obama came in, put in 770 billion. So the question now would be, as an expert in what you do, and after stabilizing the Nigerian economy during that period, how will you then salvage the economy in the current situation, because the economy is totally bad? So do you intend to have this type of intervention? Things of that sort?
Okay. Now, first of all, thank you very much. First, this is the reason why I say that the next president of Nigeria cannot be somebody who does not understand economics. If we love ourselves in this country, we should understand that the time has come to elect to political authority people who have a vision, who have the character, but also people who have the technical competence, because the problems of Nigeria are very practical problems. They can only be solved by people who have the knowledge and who have the experience and who have the desire for the prosperity of the average Nigerian. They cannot be solved by people whose ambition is to be distributing the contents of Ghana must go bags every 4 years. So, how will we stimulate the economy? I talked about the 500 billion naira venture capital fund, and I said it's a minimum. We could take it to $1 trillion. Part of what that fund will do could be to bail out certain businesses, especially manufacturing. That's one of the things that happened after the global financial crisis, after a massive recession. So we can stimulate the economy by injecting support and capital into small businesses, into manufacturing, and as they begin to get back onto their feet, they begin to create jobs and so on. And then we begin to truly diversify the economy away from oil until we make this country an economy that does not depend on the oil price. We will continue to be on life support. That life support, I will yank it off as president of Nigeria. Life support of oil price. That has made us so lazy. And every few years we must go into a cycle of boom and bust, because as the oil price goes down, everything goes down with it. So we need a different type of economy, and that's why I say I'm going to yank off that oil, that petro complex life support.
Now, by the way, you have a very lovely family. And it is very, very important, sir, to know that Nigeria is indeed a massive country. And because it's massive, there are a lot of Nigerians that don't have identity. And that is the problem. Most of your policies, very fantastic. Most of the initiatives in terms of empowerment are very good. But there are a lot of Nigerians that don't even know of these policies and can't access these policies. You go to Onitsha, you go to Maiduguri, you go to these places like Damaturu, you meet them, they don't have access to education, they are underemployed. I want to know what you're going to do about it, because most of the things you mentioned are things that the elites can access.
Yeah.
But people that are not...
I think I get the point.
Yes, but how to connect it, sir,
Yeah.
to security.
Okay.
Because you have actually talked about economy.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that this government woo voters for in 2015 was security.
Yes.
So I want to know your take on how to secure Nigeria.
Absolutely.
Especially the fact that we have, across the northern flank, a unpoliced border.
Yeah.
And that the insurgents are moving inward into the middle
Yeah.
belt. We know of the crisis
Yes.
in Plateau State, in Benue State, across
Okay,
the
sir.
border. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's a very important question that you have raised. The first issue we need to address, and I think it will be addressed under the government that we will be forming in 2019 by God's grace. We must have a very different conception of what national security means. National security should not become a very narrow subject, just, oh, Boko Haram is troubling us, so Boko Haram, Boko Haram, Boko Haram. Meanwhile, the Boko Haram actually is still very much active. Now, it is very vitally important for us to secure this country by dealing with the matter of our national borders. We must police our borders very effectively to prevent unrestricted movements of nationalities into our territory and outside. We have ECOWAS, the free protocol on the free movement of persons. That is true, but you still must go through certain checks. You just may not need a visa if you're from an ECOWAS country. So that's number one. Number two, I've talked about the police force. We really need a radical and transformational approach to policing in this country. We must beef up our numbers to at least 1.5 million, maybe 2 million. And we have to now go into the question of training and equipment for the border and immigration officials in all our land borders. So our approach to national security will be multi-pronged. But the number one thing is that we believe that Nigerians have the right to sleep at night without one eye open. And that we will ensure. There are many ways to do that. Police reform, border reform. If we need to build walls, we will. We will do what is necessary and putting the necessary resources in place. Number one thing in security is political will. I'm not sure that the people in power today have the political will to address the foundational causes of the insecurity in this country. That's the real problem.
My name is Lukman Haruna from Nigeria First Platform and Think Right Future Forum. My question is as us. You know, the judiciary is one of the problems of this country. Or let me say the legal system of the country, the delay in the legal system and how it's affecting our people, its affordability and what have you. So we all know the problem in the legal system. So what are you going to do to address that when you choose to be the president? And on the aspect of right protection, be it property right, human right, and what have you. So what are you going to do to make sure things are in place on this particular aspect? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Equal under the law. If we become, as we have become in this country, like an animal farm, in which all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others, the rule of law cannot be enforced. So I have the political will to enforce the rule of law on the basis of the equality of all Nigerians and the accountability of all Nigerians for any breach of the law. That's number one. It is when you have that political will that your government or the government you lead makes everyone accountable. Number one. Number two, the independence of the judiciary of this country will be respected 100% under my government. You will see in the book, Build, Innovate and Grow Big, that I speak a lot about why institutions matter. And very few institutions matter as much as the judiciary, because as we say, it is the last hope of the common man. We will give the judges space, we will allow the National Judicial Council and the appropriate councils to handle issues within the judiciary, but we will keep pressure on them to make sure they do so. We will not be going into the homes of judges at midnight claiming they did this or they did that, abusing due process. How can you abuse due process and expect the rule of law to hold in your country? How can a court order the release of a person before it and you ignore the ruling of the court? If you ignore the ruling of the court, what you are saying as a government is that the court doesn't matter. When you say that, all confidence in the rule of law in your country will be destroyed. That is what has happened in this country. We have a government that does not obey the rule of law, and that must end.
Next question, please, sir.
I have a question for you, sir.
Yes.
Do we look forward to a Kingsley Moghalu who is kind enough to raise for Nigeria its next generation set of leaders? That is one. Going by or given the changing dynamics of leadership globally. We have an example with France,
Yes.
Canada, Lithuania, and the rest. And then secondly, sir, I'd like to ask, should we look forward to you actually treating youth as a macroeconomic challenge? Thank you very much.
Let me start with the second. The youth are indeed a macroeconomic challenge. We have 60 million people in this country, aged between 18 and 35. We have over 30 million people who do not have jobs or are underemployed. Our population is on the rise because our population growth rate at 2.8 to 3% is much higher than our GDP growth rate. There are projections that by 2050, Nigeria could have up to 400 million people. Most of these, an overwhelming majority, will be young people. So that means that there could be a youth bulge. So this is at once an opportunity or a threat, depending on how we handle it. My government will make sure that the youth become an opportunity in this country. When you empower the youth to set up small businesses and create jobs, you are creating macroeconomic stability. And that's driven by youth employment, youth entrepreneurship, and youth innovation. When you don't do that, you are creating a youth bulge in which millions and millions of unemployed young men could lead to a breakdown of law and order and macroeconomic instability. So you see the opportunity and the threat. We will be fully conscious of the threat, but we will make sure that the threat does not materialize, starting from when we get into office. Your second question was about the youth. How are we going to make them the next generation? That is the entire mission of why I am in politics. I am in politics because our old politicians have failed us. That's why I'm in politics. I was one of those people who always felt, oh no, I would never be found near a political gathering. But I have found that the more we ignore politics, the more we subject our future to incompetent and visionless people. So, the future belongs to the youth of this country. And I am part of a movement that is dominated by the youth, without excluding other age groups or other people in our country who also want a better future for us all. Next question.
Okay, my name is Omeza Ajayi, Vanguard Newspapers.
Thank you.
Can you give us a brief insight into your foreign policy thrust and perhaps your anti-corruption, should I say, campaign? Then the man from the Middle Belt raised an issue about security. For those of us from that part of the country, it's a very serious issue. You talked about a multi-pronged approach, but we see it as something that is long-term. Now, in the interim, how do you intend to handle the herdsmen farmers crisis specifically?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've asked three very big questions. But that's good. We will address them one by one. First of all, foreign policy. In the vision that I have laid out, the foreign policy of this country should be a Nigeria first foreign policy. Let's be very clear. The national interest of Nigeria will be paramount. For us to be able to achieve that, you need to equip, reorganize, and reform what I call the diplomatic infrastructure, the foreign service. I spent many years working in the United Nations, and I was always sad when I would see diplomats in the Nigerian embassies being kicked out of their residence, being locked out by their landlords because Nigeria's government did not pay their rent. So resourcing the diplomatic machinery is very important. Training Nigeria's diplomats to understand that our foreign policy should reflect our national worldview, which I talked about. Because every foreign policy is only as effective as the domestic condition on which it rests. Our foreign policy will be based on a solid domestic foundation of governance reform, of economic transformation, and then based on that, we project ourselves into the world with Nigeria's worldview, which is summarized, of course, I would say, by the simple fact that we too are God's children, entitled to a place under the sun. So that is just very briefly about foreign policy. We're going to create a foreign service commission. Nigeria's foreign service will be run by a separate foreign service commission under my government. The Public Service Commission is not enough to address the needs of the Nigerian foreign service. We will make sure that 70% of Nigeria's ambassadors are career diplomats. 30%, yes, 30% only will be politicians. The ambassadorships in this country have for too many years become a dumping ground for politicians who didn't win the Senate, who did not become governors, but they are not trained to represent us well abroad. On the second issue, talk about corruption. My vision and the vision of my campaign and the movement that I represent on the fight against corruption is radically different from the sound and fury that we have seen for so many years that meant nothing. To fight corruption effectively, you need a number of things. One is value system re-education and orientation. This begins from primary school. And that is why I say in my vision statement that ethics will become a compulsory subject in primary and secondary education. Children must be taught the difference between right and wrong and the consequences of right and wrong. That is how you begin to fight corruption. You start from capturing the minds of young people and you create a new generation of Nigerians that overall will want to do the right thing. The second way to fight corruption is that you must show leadership by example. Then you must also plug all systemic loopholes. The systemic loopholes for fighting for corruption in this country are two, big time. One is the budgets of the national government and the budget of the state. The second is the award of contracts. In these two areas, we will be having some reforms. We will use technology. All budgets of the federal government in a government that I lead will be subjected to a forensic audit before it goes to the National Assembly to avoid budget padding. We will bring, oh yes, and we will do it. We will do it. We will bring accounting firms with forensic accountants. I'm not just going to swallow something the minister said or the permanent secretary said as the gospel truth. We will say it is true, but we will verify it. When we verify it, we will then take it forward. So that's number one. Another very important issue in fighting corruption is accountability. In the government that I will head, the accountabilities for corruption will begin with my innermost circle, the officials of my government. If you are close to me and you're part of my government, be very afraid if you're found out engaging in corrupt practice. Today, corruption, the fight against corruption is a political football. It's simply something that is against the opposition. But the people who are inside, no matter the evidence you bring, no matter the accusations you made, those in leadership or supposed leadership positions simply turn the other way. That is not a fight against corruption, because that fight has no credibility. You can only have the whole of Nigeria join you in your fight against corruption when people see that you're very truly serious about it, and that no matter whose ox is God, there will be accountability for any infractions. Now, let me address the herdsmen. The matter of the herdsmen is a very sad and harrowing issue. Let us begin with the very basic fact that national security and law and order require that anybody who takes the life of a fellow Nigerian must be punished for it. Let's just begin with that very basic fact. If that is not happening, if there is no accountability for the killings, it demoralizes Nigerian citizens. Beyond that, then, you must go to what is the root of the problem. The root of the problem is two. Number one, there's global warming. This is an environmental and ecological reality, and it is affecting the north and also some other parts of the country in a different way. But in the north, it is desertifying the whole place, and so there's a natural shift southwards in search of greener pastures, so to say. Yeah? Now, you must deal with this global warming issue by finding the people who understand the right type of science. That's why we talk about a government composed of the best and the brightest. I'm not an expert in the science of deserts, but I will find the right person who knows everything about it and how to solve those problems and empower that person. You know, so you have to deal with those problems of global warming. You must also deal with the question of culture and modernity and the clash that we're witnessing in Nigeria. The herdsmen have a cultural way, a pastoral way of life. And that's good, but we're in the 21st century. We are in the 21st. That's why we are talking about, I will be a leader for the 21st century in this country. I will not be a leader for the 18th century. So you have to address the question of the fact that we are a modern country. Should cows be roaming across airports? Should cows be roaming around the streets because somebody wants to have a lifestyle? No. You allow the person to have his or her lifestyle by establishing ranches for cattle. That's what's done everywhere in the world. Why is Nigeria different? Someone said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. That is the constant scene in Nigeria. You can't even have the strategy anyway, because some people are just so rooted in what they think is culture that they're busy living in the past and not evolving with the needs of a modern society in which the herdsman deserves his right to a livelihood, but it must be balanced with respect for the rights of other citizens.
Thank you very much. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'll have to pause on the questions. Any final words before we round up, and then you can have a meet and greet after?
Yes. Well, let me say, it's been a spirited engagement. I have a vision for a country in which we are all members of a new tribe. We are not Hausas, we are not Yorubas, we are not Igbos. We are Nigerians first and foremost. That is the Nigeria of my dream. It doesn't mean that we abolish our cultural or ethnic identity. That's important too, but we must turn that diversity into a strength. For that to happen, you need a leadership with a world view of transformation, building something out of nothing, or building one thing out of many. So I hope that we will leave with this thought in our minds that we deserve a Nigeria in which we don't want a struggling mother having to struggle to feed her child. We don't want any family living on less than 3,000 naira, 300 naira a day. We want the average per capita income in Nigeria to be at least the equivalent of $5,000. The equivalent. That's minimum. Poverty is what breeds corruption. So we must tackle corruption by tackling poverty. When people are poor, they're driven to desperation to do all sorts of things in order to survive. When public or civil servants feel they're not well paid and they're worried about what will happen when they grow old, they want to steal to prepare for tomorrow. We must provide a social safety net in this country. The government that I lead will do it. So, and let us all realize that we can achieve all these things if we decide together we can. If we say yes, we truly can. And that yes, we truly can, we're hoping that it will be demonstrated in the political process as we go forward towards 2019. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, a round of applause.